an endless war in Ukraine. This is something that we are seeing manifesting in front of us. Like, they're not backing down.
Sadly, it's with something like this, it starts from a good place or seemingly a good place, and everybody gets behind it because it's like, no, we don't want to see that happen.
Yeah.
But this
is a full-on war at this
right.
point, like between the U.S., maybe technically all of NATO, but it's like a weird thing that the U.S. has with Russia. They want to be a war, but they don't want to be a war. So they're going to do everything that they can to be at war without being at war.
Right.
Right? They're just going to support Ukraine, and they're going to stay until it's done, with no clarification on what that means.
Well, let me read this article. This is part of a transcript of Tucker Carlson's show. Whether you're a fan or not, I think when you don't watch him and you hear it read, what the transcript says, I think it could be from anybody with common sense. So I think you should try and, if someone's watching this and they have a disdain for Tucker, try and take it for what it's being said.
They aren't capable of that, though, right?
Yeah. Well,
like you're asking a cat to ask politely with words for its food when it's hungry.
Yeah. That's true, I guess.
Is that going to happen?
I don't like cats because they can't talk.
Is that ever going to happen?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But here we go. Listen anyway, and make your own opinions, I suppose. Okay. So how to influence America's greatest possible advantage is the most important task that faces any U.S. government. Nothing else comes close to that. Sadly, the Biden administration, geriatric and irrational in its best moments, is not up to the task. No one in the White House even seems aware that the architecture of the world is changing. They call themselves progressives, but the Biden people think it's 1961, when American power seemed unlimited. Just today, our elderly Treasury Secretary scolded the Chinese government like a tardy servant, sorry. Shape up, China. We'll send you back to the cellar. So here's what Janet Yellen said. We have made clear that providing material support to Russia or assistance with any type of systemic sanctions evasion would be a very serious concern to us, and we will certainly continue to make clear to the Chinese government and to companies and banks in their jurisdiction about what the rules are regarding our sanctions and the serious consequences they would face for violating them. We're going to tell them what the rules are. Once they hear the rules, they'll obey. This is Tucker now talking. Janet Yellen seems shocked and outraged that China has decided to align with Putin in the war in Ukraine. It's an outrage. It's unbelievable. Who could have seen this coming? Well, almost everybody, actually. It was obvious to the world it was going to happen because it was always going to happen if we didn't force a peace in Ukraine. But somehow the Biden administration didn't see this coming. Now that it has happened, now that the world's largest country has joined with the world's largest economy, which also has the world's largest population, in order to fight a war against us, what will we do? Well, if you're Janet Yellen, you just order them to stop. Stop it, you naughty Chinese, stop it. Otherwise, we will impose some serious consequences on you. We can't tell you what they are, but trust us, they're serious. And they might even include further statements of outrage. So I'm going to summarize this little bit here where it talks about basically how everybody has this one talking point. It's very funny when you watch it.
Right. It's clearly coordinated.
Exactly.
Right?
So if you watch this video, you'll see that everybody has this. You see it all the time. Yes. That was what? Is that squeaking the table?
That didn't sound. You just seem like a crazy person. Like, what do you?
That's true. I guess it wouldn't have been heard. Anyways, okay, I'm a crazy person. But here's sorry. Here's what they were saying. So this is President Biden. He said, "Freedom is priceless. It's worth fighting for as long as it takes, and that's how we're going to be with you, Mr. President, for as long as it takes." And then John Kirby, as the president has said, and we're going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Kamala Harris, again, the United States will continue to strongly support Ukraine, and we will do so for as long as it takes. Janet Yellen, as President Biden has said, we will stand with Ukraine and its fight for as long as it takes. Like, do they?
As long as it takes For what?
Exactly, and that's the thing. It goes on. This video goes on for about 14 minutes, right? But the general point of it is to show you that the goalposts just continue to move.
Yeah.
And the amount of money spent there is climbing, and would be obviously better served here at home, right? For infrastructure and things like that Ohio spill. But it's like there's no clear objective at this point. Is it? Right. So what do you want to happen here? Do you want the Ukraine to take Crimea? Crimea. That's it. Do you want them to take that and then stop there? Like, it seems like there's no end to it. It's basically the collapse of the Russian government.
That's what it seems like. They just want to get rid of Putin.
And how do you do that? How is that a goal? A reasonable goal where you think you can attain that, and people are just going to say, well, okay, well, we'll just collapse then. Or are they going to fight and they're going to use all the different weapons at their disposal?
Yeah.
And we know the kind of
I think
weapons.
they've wanted a war with Russia for a long time.
Right.
And I think now they're seeing their opportunity to push into one.
Well, we've talked about this before.
And they're using the Ukraine thing as propaganda to garner support from the normies that don't know fuck all about anything.
Right. Well, we've talked about this before on other podcasts where it's when not to say that necessarily, I think you believe this, but not to say necessarily that the U.S. Is collapsing as a nation, but in the death throes of a nation, when they are collapsing, they do erratic things. And this seems like an erratic thing, where you're going to now call on war with two of the other
it's a world war.
Nuclear powers.
Regardless, it's a world war. Right. But Art said, this is the result of the incendiary actions of the U.S. In 2014, U.S. intervened in Donetsk and Luhansk, I don't know how to pronounce these things, predominantly Russian areas, really never part of Ukraine. U.S. meddles, which escalates violence. And yet, like, fuck, man, the U.S. has been meddling in everything, everywhere for decades now.
Right.
And, like, other countries have a right to be pissed.
Yeah. And I mean, if they just continue to meddle the way they normally meddle, where they kind of, where they do things that they accuse other countries of doing over here, which is funny, meddling with elections and things like that.
Yeah.
If they were to do that kind of thing, it would probably be relatively tolerated.
Yeah. And he says Putin is more pragmatic than past leaders. I don't think he nukes. I don't know.
I tend to agree with that. I don't think he does either. But
I think
you corner a cat.
Nukes are on the table.
Yeah, you corner a cat though, and you don't know what they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
Like if he knows that there is no end to this without the absolute destruction of Russia, and that ends up being something that looks like it's going to happen, what's going to stop him?
Nothing.